Hi, everybody. I'm Julianna Forlano. You are watching Act Now. Thanks for joining us. There have been loads of actions in D.C. and across the country to support voting rights. Right now, it's very important that we do this before Christmas. We're going to talk about why that's important. In fact, we had our own folks from act.tv covering the events that are transpiring in Washington, D.C., and we're going to take a look at those. In fact, there's so much action going on that's basically what we're doing today for the whole show. So stay tuned. Republicans may take control of the House next year, thanks largely to extreme gerrymandering by Republican state legislatures. Republicans in Congress are opposing the critical legislation that we need to combat discrimination in voting practices. As pressure grows for Democrats to pass two key voting rights bills, activists are holding the last in a series of protests at the White House. Nearly 100 people have been arrested since August, including Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s 13-year-old granddaughter, Yolanda King. We brought her to you on the week that she was actually speaking. So don't forget to look back in our shows and take a look at what she said. States are suppressing the vote across the South, where, of course, you'd expect it to be happening like that, but also in the Midwest, where you'd sort of expect it, but not 100%, and even the far West, which I thought along the coast was blue. Anyway, there is a way to stop this, and that is in reach. Congress has to pass the two federal voting rights bills that are on the table right now, the John Lewis bill and the Freedom to Vote Act, which, by the way, Joe Manchin was a partial author of. So we have the 51 votes. There's no Kirsten Sinema, Joe Manchin BS. Ben Jealous at the People for the American Way gave credit to Vice President Kamala Harris, saying that she's done her job in getting the consensus that we have now, the 51 votes, as president of the Senate. He and protesters are calling on President Joe Biden to do his job and call on the Senate to create a path for an up or down vote on these bills so we can stop this voter suppression now before that gerrymandering goes through and we can wave goodbye to our democracy in December. It is mid-November. This is not good. This is not a great timeline. So folks are out pressuring Biden. Ben Jealous says that the president understands the importance of stopping these bills, but, we haven't seen in him anything. We haven't seen him call on the Senate to get the job done. And Ben Jealous also points out that President Trump called on the Senate to create a whole carve out in the filibuster so that he could pack the Supreme Court with far right-wing justices. So let's go, Joe, right? We've been covering these actions at the Capitol for a couple of weeks. Here's a piece put together by act.tv's own Phil Jacobs, who is on the ground for many, many of these events.
Walk strong, you gotta walk strong, and a walking song, and walking song. When we're walking,
The reason why I'm here is because we're not going back. We're not scaling back to another time, to another place that we need to focus on right now in the future. Our kids, our kids' kids, and I'm here for generations yet unborn.
Today, we are, some of us, going to jail. That's right. Or going to be arrested. We plan to be arrested.
the footsteps of John Lewis. Yeah.
And today, my daughter, my wife, daughter, and I, and other young people are going to be arrested.
Yeah.
We got to make sure
Yes, sir.
that we consistently do what John Lewis encouraged us to do.
Teach, sir. Teach.
He's talked about getting in good trouble. That's what we are standing here today saying. This is good trouble.
Good trouble.
And that was brought to you by our very own Phil Jacobs, who is on the scene with you many times. Jocelyn, thank you so much for joining me on the program. Jocelyn Macurdy Keatts of Act TV and of this very show. Hi, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Juliana. It's been incredibly inspiring to watch the activists gather in front of the White House consistently over the fall. And it's a very powerful thing to witness Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's, not just his figurative descendants, but his literal descendants out here getting arrested for the same things that he fought for and ideally won.
Jocelyn, when we've been speaking about this over the course of a few weeks since it's been happening since August, you said that this last demonstration had a particularly intense tone. Can you talk about that and why it was a little different from the ones before?
Yesterday's, there were 250 people who were arrested, as opposed to, I think the highest before that was something like 80 to 100 people. But so we started out in Black Lives Matter Plaza with the organizers and the activists and the civil rights leaders, Reverend Barber from the Poor People's Campaign, and hundreds marched towards the White House with 250 getting nonviolently arrested.
That is amazing. I understand that people took buses in for this particular event. They came from, was it Michigan, Chicago, a number of different places?
Yeah, from all over the country. It was incredibly powerful to be a part of. And as Ben Jealous says, you know, consistently throughout all these actions, when the League of Women Voters are getting arrested outside your White House, you probably have some introspecting to do. They have not been this involved in the struggle since Woodrow Wilson was in office, because we really are entering a very surreal nightmare situation where this right to the ballot that has been fought for so vigorously and so bravely over the past 200 years is now getting rolled back.
It's really shocking what are happening. You know, it's just really shocking. And I didn't really realize the urgency of this moment. Jocelyn, if these bills are not passed by Christmas, then redistricting next year will be done in a way that will be incredibly undemocratic, partisan, gerrymandered. I didn't realize that this is really our last chance to fix this issue. Otherwise, for the next decade, we're going to have districts that don't reflect the people who live there and reflect the moneyed interests and the ambitions of the politicians who run those states.
Well, and I think it's really important to understand the history of this country and this struggle in context. Something that Reverend Barber brought up a number of times yesterday is that poor white men only received the right to the ballot a couple decades before Black men did. So the progression is you have to be a property owning white man, then you can be a Black man, allegedly, right? I mean, Black voters have faced violence at the polls all throughout, and different points, but all throughout this period of Reconstruction and Jim Crow. Sometimes physical violence, sometimes harassment and being threatened by their employers, sometimes degrading, intricate history tests that nobody in their right mind could pass. Like, you know, who was the 3rd district court judge of that random county? And then we have the civil rights movement. We have Dr. King. We have Rosa Parks. We have all the incredible organizers and brilliant intellectuals and faith leaders who put their bodies on the line to pass the Civil Rights Act. And since then, we have now seen those voting protections rolled back. We're needing increasingly aggressive forms of ID. Now you can't drink water while you're in line to vote.
Right.
Now we're having no voting on weekends. Now we're having no early voting.
And these federal laws would curtail all of that in 2 foul swoops. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because currently the case that Republicans are making is that states should have the freedom to manage their own election bills, which is a state of affairs that led to Jim Crow. You had states in the South saying, oh, sure, you can vote, but you have to pay a poll tax, which is obviously going to be cost prohibitive. And, you know, I mean, even a lot of people make the argument that the aggressive and intricate forms of voter ID basically are a poll tax, which I think is an incredibly reasonable argument, because it costs you not just money in terms of the fees you have to get to access your documents and your passport and all these other, I mean, anyone who's ever applied for a passport knows it's a semi-expensive process, but the time it takes to get all those things together.
I mean, well, I'm just going to let the speakers say it for themselves, because as I was watching this, I was just really struck by, it was kind of like first they come for this group and I said nothing, and then they come for that group. It's like exactly that. You can't imagine that they were going to try to roll back voting rights mostly for people of color. I've been following this. We've been following the interstate cross-check systems that kick hundreds of thousands of people off the voter rolls, mostly people of color. That's a Greg Palast thing. We've had him on to talk about that several times. And then as you were saying that thing about the League of Women Voters and women, being out in front of the Capitol protesting, it occurs to me like they might find a way to do this to other groups as well. They're not going to stop at Black voters.
Well, and when you think about it, equitable childcare is a voting rights issue and vice versa, because when women first won the right to vote, something that was a fight that was done both by, feminists of all creeds and religions and communities. Black women started it, like with everything, but this was a different time for women, right? We now have an economy where almost all women work. So working women who don't get paid time off and who don't get the day off to go vote are relying on absentees, mail-in ballots, early voting, weekend voting. And the destruction of those systems and the destruction of that access is done intentionally. So only the very privileged and the very white will be able to vote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they would do it just outright if they could, but they have to do it kind of sneaky. We're going to close all the polling locations. So you have to stand in line for 18 hours in the heat often. And then we're not going to allow you to have water. It's overt, but not as overt as saying Blacks can't vote or Asians can't vote, or you know what I mean? But they're doing it. So let's listen to some of the folks who were at the event. There were two events taking place yesterday. People for the American Way and a bunch of other groups were getting together. And I have some clips of this for the Voting Rights Now movement. I have some clips. This is Reverend Dr. Rebecca Stitch.
My name is Reverend Dr. Rebecca Stitch. All right. I'm the pastor of St. Peter's African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, located in Cleveland, Ohio. I came out here because I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. They knew what John Lewis has done. They knew how he had been beaten just because of the right to vote. But yet we got members sitting in Congress right now with deaf ears. Mark Meadows was his best friend, Republican. Mitch McConnell knew him. Grassley knew him. But yet they got deaf ears. I remember the civil rights movement. I remember what folk went through. And it's a shame that we've got to come here and do it all over again 50 years later. So I want you all to shout with your highest voices that we will vote. We will vote. We want our vote. We want our vote. We want our right to vote. We want our right to vote.
Intense. Beautiful.
Well, and the Republicans are engaged in a very psychologically motivated thing. It's like, oh, people can vote. Of course people can vote if you're super motivated.
Right.
Of course, we only want the super motivated to vote. Except for when you look at what they call motivation is really just access to resources. Mm-hmm. Polling places are not being shut down in wealthy neighborhoods. They're being shut down in communities of color. Which
you make a good point about people who are really motivated. I think it bears saying that the nonprofit wing of the voting rights group that Stacey Abrams founded, the Fair Fight Action, I think it's called, reported they raised $51 million in 2020. That's tax records that just came out in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This is after Stacey Abrams lost to Brian Kemp after he whatever you call it, jerried with he fooled with the election results. That's pretty clear. Anyway, her PAC gave a lot of funding to Democrats to win the presidential and the U.S. state races down in Georgia, aided party voter programs across the country, and Biden won Georgia in 2020. And the party flipped both those Senate seats there in January 2021. And her groups are playing a major role in making that happen. So it's not, when we're talking about people who are motivated, these are the people who are motivated.
Well, and that's incredibly true. I mean, it really is. It's funny because you hear people be cynical about progressives and activists, but for me, I think it's incredibly beautiful and impressive what people have been able to organize for and win. Obviously, we're not perfect. No one is. But when you really look at the powers against us and the things that progressive groups have been able to accomplish anyway, it's inspiring.
Well, I do hope that's why people watch this show, because I feel like there's a lot of shows out there that just will say what everyone is doing wrong. And I also feel like it's psychological warfare is happening out there. And we have to keep our minds with the force that's doing well. I really do think Biden is going to come around. I think he's waiting till the last minute so that the grassroots can get out there and get really upset and get media coverage like what we're doing. This is my thoughts on why Biden hasn't moved yet. I think he is going to do something. I'm not sure, but I think so. So that's my take on it. Your thoughts?
I hope so. He definitely is on the right side of this issue, which is why these groups are out there, because it's kind of perplexing. It's, you have 400 voter suppression legislation bills introduced all over the country in Republican dominated state legislatures. And it's a terrifying thing to witness. Mm-hmm. We all have relied on absentee or early voting at some point in our lives. The idea of that being restricted is very scary, especially as we're just, sort of maybe leaving this pandemic, and we'll probably have another one, unfortunately. That's the way public health crises tend to work. But
no, I'm not even done.
People relied on absentee voting last year in a huge way.
Yeah. Very interesting. So you mentioned Reverend William Barber speaking. He is obviously very important to this movement. I think he founded Souls to the Polls, which was a movement to get people in church to vote on Sunday as a block after the service. Moral Mondays he founded. He is part of the Poor People's Campaign. He is a really, integral, important figure in Black political life and progressive political life at this moment. He was there, as you said. We do have a clip of him speaking, so let's take a listen.
So thankful for the League of Women Voters and Virginia and Ben, my dear friend. At come points that the spirit pulls the family together. And so on behalf of Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, the Poor People's Campaign, the 43 coordinating committees, the partners, the 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country. I don't know if you know it, but in every battleground state, if just 20% of poor and low wealth people who have not voted would vote and be organized together, they could determine every election in this country. And that is the sleeping giant that they are literally afraid of. I wanted to come here today. I told Virginia I wrote something because I wanted to kind of make a teaching video that you can show anywhere, because folk need to really understand what's going on. And Mr. President, we want you to succeed and we will stand with you. But we need you to fight against the filibuster, because the filibuster is being used to fight against us and to bring down the democracy. We also need you to fight to invite us in to talk to you in the White House. You need to bring religious leaders and women activists and poor and low-wage people, the people you say you care about. You need them in the Oval Office. You've met with the senators. You've met with the corporate leaders. Now meet with us who make this country run. We need you to understand that something is happening that is trying to deny people the right to vote and to deny living wages, to deny the provisions in your own Build Back Better program. It's all connected. It's not separated. Oh, that's just the devil. It's not separated. Republican extremists like McConnell changed the filibuster to put Supreme Court justices on the bench for life. Mr. President, now they, can I tell the truth? Can I tell the truth? Now they and two Democrats are using the filibuster to destroy and undermine the life of this democracy and the daily needs of people. There are three infrastructures. The infrastructure of our daily lives, which is education and health care and wages. The infrastructure of our democracy, which is voting rights. And the infrastructure of our bridges, our roads and technology. And we don't want some of it. We demand all of it.
Oh, that was so great. I really hope that President Biden watches our clip that we were that we rolled of this. I wonder how much media attention could you tell was media?
Oh,
was there a lot
yeah,
of media
it was.
there?
People were out there. It was a huge action. There really were hundreds of people just like flooding the streets before the White House. And fortunately,
mainstream media outlets. I know.
Oh yeah. I hope.
Thank God. I mean, you never know. I've covered all these. I've covered marches and rallies and whatever, and sometimes it's just us and Democracy Now! And like a few live streamers. And then, I thought it was a really good plan to do it week after week because that really works well for the media, so that people can set the agenda like we try to do. Talk, point at things that are happening that are important, not just grabbing onto whatever is being spoken about on Twitter or in the mainstream media news cycle, and really point to things that are happening. And then they did it week after week after week, and it really allowed the coverage to grow. So I was happy to see that. Let's play a little bit of the footage that act.tv had that you were able to pull and pick out for us. You tell us what we're about to see. I think it's part of the march. Is that right?
Yes. So the march from people, again, started on Black Lives Matter Plaza, right where Trump held the Bible up and we all got tear gassed. Well, he had his weird little anti-Black Lives Matter stunt, and people gathered there clearly to make a statement. Black
Look at that crowd.
Matter, they're not going away, and marched directly towards the White House.
That's beautiful.
It was just a very stirring moment to watch.
That's really beautiful. I know. We also have, I don't know, is there sound on that, Giancarlo? Giancarlo, our intrepid producer in the background, making things look good and happen.
We are live this morning from
That's you.
Voting rights. It is a beautiful morning. As you can see, the march being led by Reverend Barber from the Poor People's Campaign. And we are out here with hundreds of young people and civil rights leaders who are willing to risk nonviolent arrest for voting rights.
Hallelujah. Let's get justice. Yeah. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was y'all sound like a church.
Very beautiful.
This morning with my mind, and it was
Activists are marching from Black Lives Matter Plaza straight towards the White House to call upon President Joe Biden and pressure Democratic majority Congress to pass federal voting rights, which prevent people from being disenfranchised at the ballot box through unfair restrictions, diminished polling places, diminished security, and rollbacks on early and absentee voting, which target people of color. People are out here fighting the new Jim Crow with their voices, willing to participate in jail sacrifice and get arrested in front of the White House itself.
I don't know if my mic is also on, but I hate to turn down the beautiful music that's happening here. But
I know. I almost hate the sound of my own voice over that because
it's you have to tell the people what we're seeing. You were there live, and they streamed it. They streamed it live, so it is important to know. I think what's striking me is that if President Biden does start pushing the Senate to do what's right and does call for an up or down vote, for which we have the votes. We have 51 votes. Thank you, Kamala Harris. He is going to go down in history the same way Johnson has gone down in history when it comes to voting rights. I think, not that he's like looking to make history. I mean, he was already the vice president under Barack Obama, and blah, 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 blah. But this is a big deal for him and his campaign.
Well, and I think the problem that we're facing, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. There you are.
And this is why I am so proud of the People for the American Way and everybody who was involved. League of Women Voters, Black Voters Matter, Black Lives Matter, Poor People Campaign, everybody, because it is, again, this is a more counterintuitive problem that if you're not in the disenfranchised communities may not be as obvious to you, or maybe even if you are, maybe it's like, oh, they just closed down that polling place. What a weird coincidence. No, it's not a weird coincidence. It's an orchestrated campaign that is happening at a national level.
Well, you pulled another clip of a speaker that you found particularly powerful. What are we about to see?
So this was one of the many civil rights leaders who, I think she'd been there a couple times, but I just thought she explained things pretty well for people who maybe weren't at the White House yesterday.
Right. Okay, let's take a listen.
And all of those indivisible groups across the country are in this fight. But President Biden is not in this fight yet. President Biden needs to join us in this fight. He needs to do what it takes to get these bills passed, to get the Freedom to Vote Act passed, and that means getting rid of the filibuster. That means pushing Democrats in the Senate to get this done. We're going to keep coming back every day, and indivisibles are going to keep showing up across the country until we pass these bills, until we have the freedom to vote, and until we win. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And next we have Wanda Mosley from Black Voters Matter. Wanda?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wanda Mosley. I'm the National Field Director of Black Voters Matter. Come on. Woo! Can't even begin to tell you how proud I am to stand with so many people who are risking their bodies here today because they know how important our right to vote is, and they know that it is under attack. But I need you to understand what is at stake at this time and moment and in this place. We are living in a world where, as Black and brown people, we cannot get clean drinking water. Do you understand that there are people in Denmark, South Carolina, that have to take jugs to a stream and fill them regularly to bring back to their home because the water that runs through their pipe is brown? Not only is it not drinkable, they can't even bathe in that water on some days. Do you understand that there are people in Texas this last spring who suffered a storm that took out all the power, that busted pipes, that didn't have clean drinking water? Those mamas with their babies in the park with jugs, filling them with water so that they can wash and clean themselves. But at the same time, you got lawmakers in Texas who are more worried about what I can do with my body. They're so busy in my business that's between me and my doctor, but you can't keep your state on the grid after a storm. You can't keep clean drinking water for mamas and their babies. And then if you travel on up to Benton Harbor, Michigan, see, they're not filling jugs in Benton Harbor, Michigan, but they are coming to pick up cases of water, dropped pallet after pallet by the state, because the state has failed so many people to give them clean drinking water, healthy water. All of this happens at the same time when a white boy in Wisconsin can murder 2 people, then go see police and they hand him a bottle of water. But myself in Georgia, my people from Protect the Vote, my friend Marion Warren in Sparta, in Hancock, Georgia, our people in Coffee County, in Lawrence County, in Thomas County, all across the state of Georgia. When we go to the polls and we see people who have been in line 6, 8, 9 hours, we risk arrest for offering them a bottle of water. All of this is because the people in power know they are losing power. And they are fearful that when we take back power, when we take this power, they are fearful that we don't do to them what they've been doing to us for centuries. But we ain't got time for that. Because see, we got to go fix all these things that they broke, that they neglected. We know we need better schools. So we don't have time to be playing these games. President Biden, when you were a candidate, when your candidacy for president was struggling, and as my boss and my mentor, Latasha Brown, said, before the Black voters in South Carolina pulled a Lazarus and raised your campaign for the dead,
nice.
You told us you would fight like hell for voting rights. Mr. President, where are you? What are you doing? When are you going to start fighting like hell? I see you sitting in the office. I saw you fight like hell for Build Back Better. I saw you fight like hell to get things under control with vaccines, and we thank you for that. But still, you have not even begun to fight, let alone fight like hell for my right to vote.
Well said.
So I need you to understand that the voters in Georgia, we risked our lives in a pandemic. There was no vaccine. And we came out and we voted because our lives depended on it. Our very existence depended on it. We voted because I want to have the right to jog down the street and not get gunned down like a dog and then have to sit and watch my mirrors walk. So President Biden, understand, we are not done with you, sir. We are here to tell you we are sick and tired of the excuses. No more excuses. We are not going to bargain for our right to vote. We are not going to negotiate for our right to vote. We are here simply to demand that you do what needs to be done. You have remedies, sir. It's not that hard.
It's not that hard.
You passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and you passed the Freedom to Vote Act, so we can get on with the business of this country.
It's very good.
Very
Great
good.
clip. A lot of different things came to mind while I was watching that clip. You know, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't even know where to start. The one thing that really stuck out to me was when she said, you know, you've done some things for Black people, meaning the Build Back, things that are in the reconciliation or the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill. But it occurred to me that that's like, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat the fish for one day. But if you teach him how to fish, he can feed his family forever. It's like, you know, if you give, you know, a child tax credit or whatever, and then you turn over the democracy to impending fascism, well, the tax credit's not going to do anything and it's not going to last.
Well, you know? And it's why Black organizers who have done so much for this country have every right to be wary of seemingly benign white politicians who are happy
or seemingly benign Black politicians.
Well, right there. But I think that the race aspect is important here because it's, you know, Joe Biden really was put in office by Black organizers. He absolutely was. Black voters came out in historic numbers last year, despite the pandemic, despite serious obstacles in all of our way of voting, and got him elected both in the primary and the general. And it is his job now to deliver for Black voters in a serious way, but with voting rights. And this is something that comes up a lot whenever we attend these rallies, these events. For Black civil rights organizers and leaders, there is a dark irony to the fact that this is something that they have already won. This is not a fight that we should have to have every 10 to 15 years or every couple generations.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I actually have a clip from the next, from the Black Women Take Action that actually was happening on the same day down in the Capitol. This is the Honorable Angela Alsobrooks. Just a note to Giancarlo, we're going to skip the first one that was in order because Jocelyn brought up this idea that we're fighting the same battle over and over. Honorable Angela Alsobrooks from Prince George's County. She's an executive there. That's Maryland. Let's take a listen.
A little frustrated to be here. As I was driving over today, I was saying to myself, well, we're asking for something that belongs to us. If you can imagine how frustrating it is and how angry you feel when something that has already been purchased. We're talking about freedoms that have already been earned for us. We think about John Lewis and the blood that he shed, that he was beaten to a pulp. We talk about Dorothy Irene Height And so I'm not standing here today asking for something that doesn't already belong to us. We're asking for something that is already, that battle has been fought for so many years, for over a century. We've been fighting the same battle over and over again. And like Cora said, she's right about it. We don't even know why we're still here asking for something we already purchased. It's kind of like going to a store with hard-earned money, money you knew you earned. You bought something, got home, you looked in the bag and said, where is it? And that's how we feel today. We're asking that question again, where is it? And why must we continue to demand to have something that our foreparents fought hard, died over, suffered? And so we're standing on good ground today and on good authority. And so I feel comforted walking with my sisters today to ask Congress to do the right thing. They already know what it is.
Jocelyn, give me some clarity about the two different events happening on the same day in the same space. What was that?
So they actually were a day apart.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So the Black Women Roundtable with a number of other organizations, Black women and Black men and all kinds of. But we met up at the Black Women Roundtable and heard from a number of Black women civil rights leaders, marched past the Capitol to the Supreme Court, where we heard from more civil rights leaders, because the reality is that almost everything that's good about America has been won by Black women, including women's suffrage, which Black women were organizing for the right to vote long before white women were. Go figure. But, it's something that is, this whole thing has been very sinister to watch play out, because again, this is the demographic that almost single-handedly put Joe Biden over the edge.
So let's take a look. I saw this video of the marching from that event, which was really, really moving. Let's take a look. You can turn the sound up. I love it.
What democracy looks like. This is what democracy. I can't hear you. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy. Come on now. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy. I said, tell me what
love
democracy
it.
looks like.
Jocelyn, is that you holding the camera?
No, that would be Will.
That would be Will. This is the interesting thing. That chant, this is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. It is predicated on the fact that we don't have a corporatocracy, that people want democracy, that there's still a commitment to democracy in this country. But half the country is just giving lip service to democracy. They love corporatocracy. And there's a whole group of people who are fine with fascists, attacking the state houses, fascists doing all the different things that they've been doing, from in the street attacking of peaceful protesters to, January 6th shenanigans to, hosting right-wing media shows and taking it upon themselves to do so. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know if this is what democracy looks like is an applicable chant against fascism, because that's what we're fighting here. Are we not?
Well, and it is something that gets more and more harrowing the more we think about it. I think people don't really understand that, or actually we do understand, people understand, but Republican legislators don't understand that it is incredibly obvious to us. If you need a certain amount of income to be safe, if you need a certain amount of income to have a regular free and clear line to the ballot box, then that is not a free country by any stretch of the imagination. And that is why everything on the progressive agenda, if you even want to call it the progressive agenda, is widely popular with the American public. Most people do not want to pour oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Most people do not believe that pharmaceutical prices would be so egregiously expensive.
But here's the question. You are right about everything you've said. Here's the question. What power structure is going to get behind this movement? Do you believe, I'm not sure if the voting bloc angle of the, African American women plus African American men who voted for Democrats, at least over the last, several decades. Is that enough of a power source to fight the powers that be who would be fine with corporate fascism?
Well, it's an interesting question, Juliana. I mean, you have to measure Democrats' self-interest with the midterm elections coming up. And this is where it does get bizarre, because when we're talking about Democrats, we're not talking about Democratic voters. We're talking about Democratic leaders in Congress who are insulated from a lot of these problems. The one thing they're not insulated from is re-election, and they do still ultimately need their constituents. Something else that comes up at these rallies a lot. People say, you know what, we're sick of politicians only pretending to care about us when they need our
4 years.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Interesting. Very interesting. We have a bunch of other clips that were super powerful. This is Congresswoman Shontel Brown from Ohio, the 11th district in Ohio. She was talking about the vote being the great equalizer. Let's take a listen.
Vote is the greatest equalizer of power in our country. Whether you are black,
wait, you got to go
white,
back. I think it was.
Gay
I think you started
or straight, rich or poor, male or female, from GED to PhD, we all get one vote. So if we don't use our vote, we will find ourselves turning back, going back, reversing the hands of time. And that's what we're seeing before us right now. So it is so critically important that we use that vote in every single election. It cannot just be the presidential election. It cannot just be your gubernatorial elections. We have to vote in our local elections for our city folks, for our school board folks, because they are the ones that impact our everyday lives. And it's the local government, the states, that are putting forth legislation to suppress the vote so much now that's making it harder for us to get the vote, because they know what? That is the greatest equalizer. People don't try to take things away from you unless they have value. And so because of that, it is so critical that we at Congress move this legislation forward. And I am committed, I am fully committed to doing the work to deliver results. That's what the people of Ohio's 11th Congressional District elected me to do, and that is what I intend to do. So we got phase 1, part 1 of the Build Back Better legislation passed, and we hope to be able to deliver part 2 this week.
Yes. And Giancarlo, we are covering the we've moved on from the Voting Rights Now direct action to the other action, which was the day before. Is that right, Jocelyn? I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this is the right one. So our little lower third, it's kind of not the right one. This is the Black Women Take Action action. So there you go. We're labeled.
One thing that was very cool to watch, which I don't think you necessarily get from the live stream just because of the way cameras work, but how much these women clearly love each other. It was just, the vibe was good vibes only, for real. Everybody was just, these women believe in each other. They work together on this issue. And it's just such a stark contrast from some of the weird House of Cards stereotype that you associate with politics. But the reality is that a lot of these organizers are friends, they're family, they're in the foxholes together. They believe in this. This is something that brings them away from their immediate family, because they are doing work they believe to be spiritually and eternally pressing. It's not something, these aren't like paid consultants that are like, hey, everyone, we think you should be able to vote. No, These are people who believe in the cause they're fighting for and believe in each other.
And that's why it's so powerful, I would add. That's why it's so powerful. And that's why the powers that be tend to try to suppress it so aggressively, because it's almost like they don't want us to know what a loving, supportive, everybody in it for each other society actually feels like. Not just looks like, but feels like. And again, that's what we try to do through these intertubes, to bring it, we're trying to bring that vibe across the airwaves so people can tap into it and see that it's out there, and maybe, do more than watch, which is activists call letters. Janice Mathis from the Greenville, South Carolina. She's from the National Council of Negro Women. She's the executive director there. She also spoke very powerfully. Let's run her clip.
We are in front of the historic Dorothy Irene Height building. Dr. Dorothy Irene Height was many things. She was the godmother of the civil rights movement. She was the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And she is the person who inspires us to this day as President Emerita of the National Council of Negro Women. I would say that we are delighted to have you here as our guest at 633 Pennsylvania Avenue, the only black-owned building on Pennsylvania Avenue. But you can't be delighted about the loss and suppression of voting rights. You can't be delighted about unequal pay for black women. So it's not a day to be delighted, it's a day to act. And we are here because we are not content to sit by the sidelines and watch as history parades by. We insist on helping to move the axis of history toward justice.
Beautiful.
And it's weird, right? Because I think if there are two themes that seem to come up a lot, it's simultaneously this idea that each generation must re-win the same rights in a beautiful way and in a less than beautiful way. The beautiful way is that, unfortunately, democracy is never safe. It's this precious, vulnerable thing that we do have to perpetually protect. And I think there is something spiritual about that. At the same time, this one is pretty basic. A free and clear line to the ballot box, that should be pretty simple. And there is definitely a lot of frustration from
What would we do if everything was just solved? We'd go back to eating and watching TV and being consumer. We would actually, without the problems that bring us together and give us the opportunity for unity and solidarity, we would not feel unity and solidarity. I mean, on some level, hopefully, if we all had, we would feel safer and happier, as you and I are going to discuss on Tuesday, our Thanksgiving show. If we had certain things in a society, let's not blow it now, but we're going to definitely talk about that. But still, it does provide an opportunity for solidarity, for people to get together, for people to do the right thing. I think it's always a bad expectation when you think something is solved for good, especially on this planet and under capitalism. When the force for greed, which is underlying this issue. Like, if we follow the money, this is really about suppressing the vote so that the Democratic Party can't get more union and worker friendly, that the Democratic Party can't get more friendly toward policies that support women and people of color and other marginalized groups, won't be forced to vote on environmental regulation that is anti-corporate. This is, there's a lot of big money behind this voter suppression drive. It's not just, racism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it's another thing that you and I have discussed. Ironically, a lot of advancements for a lot of marginalized communities have been made through capitalism, which is not an argument for capitalism, to be clear, but a really great example. It's so stereotypical now, it's a meme, the way that corporations have adopted very pro-gay pride things when June rolls around, right? Mm-hmm. They realized, the gay community in America is actually has big purchasing power. The same thing has happened with the Black community at various times in history. Black consumers are consumers too. Maybe we should get more friendly to Black people. But that's not an argument for the capitalist market doing good things. It's an argument for, until we place a certain amount of dignity and safety at the center of who we are as a society and who we are as a public sphere, everything is always going to have to be up for grabs at all times.
Yeah.
Which it's a very stressful world to live in.
Yeah, I think it's good when people get voting, block money power, and they can make their voices heard on the market to push their agenda. But it's also, there is something, I wouldn't say people shouldn't have money or whatever, but there is something that could drive people into complacency and to think I guess we can all, we don't need these people to really vote because look, everybody can get, I don't know, shoes. Like, everybody can get this, that. There's no one saying you can't enter this restaurant anymore. So because because the market has decided that you're a valuable source for money, then I guess we don't need to, have it just be legislated that way. It's like free market capitalism ain't gonna do it.
Well, and people shouldn't have to be profitable in order to be respected.
Thank you. Well said. Jocelyn Macurdy Keatts of ACT.tv. Clip that, whoever's clipping these, and put this on the Twitters. Our last clip that we have for you is Melanie Campbell, president and the CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. She is the convener of the Black Women's Roundtable and is recognized as one of the hardest working servant leaders in today's civil rights, women's rights, and social justice movements. Here she is.
We're here today, Black women and allies, for our voting rights and economic justice freedom walk. Yes. And the thing about Janice, Dr. Height, I think she'd be smiling and thanking you for keeping, you and Dr. Cole, for keeping the fire burning here, because we know not too far away from where we stand was one of the largest slave trading locations in the nation. So we're on holy ground. And so what better place to be to do this, what we're trying to do here, what we are doing here, and that's holding it down. To be the only building between the White House and the U.S. Capitol, Dr. Height educated us on and reminded us of often, owned by an African American, owned by a Black woman. So we're here today to keep the fires burning until we win. Our voting rights are protected by passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act, to pass the Freedom to Vote Act, but it's also about making sure our people have the resources. So it's also about economic justice. We helped pass that, get that $1.2 trillion package done, infrastructure bill. We did that. You did that. Those are watching. Those who voted in 2020 did that. Be clear. People want to say, oh, that's not going to help our community. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We have to make sure that.
We've been watching coverage of the voting rights actions that have been happening in DC. The first one was the where is it? The Voting Rights Now movement that's been happening. That was the last one in several weeks. Or they had a bunch of them every week. Jocelyn, what's happening now with the movement now that they're not going to be on the Capitol every week?
Well, so I think they're going to figure that out, and we will almost certainly hear from them. Ben Jealous said, we're going to wait and see what the president does. We're going to wait and see what the Senate does for a bit and then go from there. But yesterday really was just this huge, big, beautiful turnout of, again, 250 people.
The other action, which was the day before, is the Black Women Take Action, and we brought the clips from there. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for being with us on this program. I love having you. It's great to know that you're down there getting the live coverage and that you'll be back here to give us some context on what's going on people who haven't given up, on people who are still striving, pushing, and you have to have a little bit of hope in order to do that. So it's great to keep that hope alive here on this program.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, Jocelyn. We'll see you on Tuesday for our Thanksgiving show.
I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. You're watching ACT TV. I hope you enjoyed our coverage. There was a lot going on. And we were supposed to have Ryan Grimm on today. Something happened, and he'll be with us after Thanksgiving. So that should be fun. Coming up on Tuesday's program, if all goes well, because, stuff, David Nywert's coming on to talk about Christian fascism, which I thought would be perfect for a holiday show as you maybe go home and sit down across the table from someone who feels the way David is going to talk about on the show. Okay. And then we have Jocelyn coming back because she and I are going to have a discussion about some writings that we both read that talked about, in some of our areas of expertise, that talked about what is it in a society that is proven to make people happier and that therefore saner and therefore better able to make better decisions. It certainly isn't constant fear mongering. That's not on the list. Anyway, join us for that 2 o'clock Tuesday. We are 2 o'clock Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.